Welcome back to MacStories Unwind. Today's episode is brought to you by Collide. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is our editor-in-chief at MacStories.net, Mr. Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing really well. I wanted to give you the full-on editor-in-chief introduction, you know?
That's unnecessary, but thank you.
I know. Everybody knows you're our editor-in-chief. That means you're our fearless leader, I suppose. I'm the managing editor. I should tell people that more often, I suppose.
Yes.
Whatever that means. We kind of made up our own titles, but, every website has to have an editor-in-chief, so it's good that we have one.
True.
So,
Different episode this week. So this past week, really, I've just been working on a single story. The only break that I took was to prepare the monthly log and share my experience with the game controller that I modded for the 11-inch iPad Pro. But otherwise, I've just been heads down working on this story that I will publish on Monday. The story is pretty much good to go. I just want to look it over the weekend, and it's one of the. I don't want to talk about it yet. Of course, you've read it. A bunch of other friends have read it in advance. It's, I think, the craziest thing I've ever done, and it's also possibly the project. All these projects that I have, and I think this one is my favorite. Like it's the best thing I've done for me, and other people will judge for themselves, but for me personally speaking, I absolutely love what I've done, and I cannot wait to put it out there, and the wait is killing me, but I want to wait for Monday.
Yeah, it's a fantastic project, and I guess I will say one very small thing about it, which is everybody who listens to MacStories Unwind is probably familiar with the fact that Federico loves to surprise me.
Yes.
He loves to surprise me with all sorts of different things over the years. And this one was literally so big, he could not keep it to himself.
Yeah, I had to tell you.
He had to tell me.
Yeah, because also like working on that story and publishing that story, it required sort of a green light from you, because we've been just so busy with Vision OS. And I had to tell you, John, I've done this thing. Is it okay if I work on this story instead?
Right. This is where I'm your editor-in-chief instead of the other way around.
I pitched you the story.
You did, and you floored me. I was kind of speechless at the time. This was about a week ago. But yeah, everybody should stay tuned for next week, because we'll have the story on the site, and I think people will enjoy it. So keep an eye out for that. But today I thought we would talk about a slightly different obsession, which I think probably rivals only our love of rechargeable batteries.
True.
Which is fast internet. I mentioned this on Mastodon the other day, that I have a lot of very strange obsessions, and one of them is batteries, but close to batteries is fast internet, and that includes Wi-Fi. And this all kind of arose out of the Vision Pro. The Vision Pro is one of those products that not only is it incredibly expensive in and of itself, but it does tend to cause you to spend money elsewhere. And that is absolutely what has happened with the Wi-Fi situation in both of our homes, because the thing about the Vision Pro is it's got relatively small Wi-Fi antennas in it. It's only Wi-Fi 6. It's not 6E or 7. And as a result, that's one of the choke points. That's one of the limiting factors in doing things like streaming video games to it, is that you really need fast Wi-Fi, strong, consistent Wi-Fi, and you need to be able to deliver it to a device that really can't pick up a Wi-Fi signal as well as an iPad even can. Like my iPad mini will get a better download and upload speeds than my Vision Pro very consistently if I do a test. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about what we've done about that. And I know you did a little bit, because we've talked about gaming on the Vision Pro on App Stories and here in the past. But I had been using a Linksys Atlas 6E 3 mesh network system in my house. All right. So I was a very early adopter with 6E, and I spent way too much money on it. It was more than $1,000 for that set of 3 Wi-Fi routers and nodes. And I should have waited, honestly, because I have now seen what an extra year and a half since those came out have done with Wi-Fi 6E, because I had 3 nodes. To give you an idea, my house is 3 stories. I'm in a townhome, so it's like first floor, second floor, third floor, and the internet comes in on the first floor. So I need to then get that up all the way to all 3 floors. And the Linksys Atlas system was good, but it's very hard to deal with that kind of vertical arrangement. It's even harder that the fact that my internet comes into a closet that's under the stairs on the first floor. So it's literally blocked by more like wood and walls than a typical space. It's a very confined, small walk-in closet that is under a set of stairs that are hardwood stairs. And I got to get that signal all throughout the house. And the Linksys routers were good, and they had a little more control than something like an Eero, which is what you were using, the Eero 6 Pro, I believe, if I remember right.
Yes.
Right. And the thing about the Eero, incredibly easy to set up.
Yep.
Very good quality hardware, but there's no way to really tweak it in any kind of meaningful way. The Linksys Atlas that I had, those were a close second to that. They had more. I could do a little bit more. I could tweak more things, but not nearly to the degree of where you and I have both ended up with our good friend Asus and their Wi-Fi routers. And we've got different setups, but I wanted to talk about, I guess, the setup, but I also want to talk to you a little bit about how much I wish Apple would deal with this. Because now I don't expect, there's 2 things here going on here. One is, whatever Apple created for Wi-Fi, I don't think you and I would probably be super satisfied with it, because I can't imagine that they would let us go in and tweak the channels for each band of Wi-Fi and all the kind of, real detailed stuff you can do with Asus. But on the other hand, dealing with Wi-Fi, dealing with networking of any kind, whether it's wired, wireless, whatever it happens to be, it's a real pain. It's complicated. And if you have anything other than a very plain vanilla setup, it gets frustrating very, very quickly. And I just feel like, especially the reason you and I ended up with these routers, is exactly the kind of thing that Apple could have solved with their own Wi-Fi router. And I'm talking in particular about the fact that with the Vision Pro, there's this notorious problem when streaming games to the Vision Pro, well, really streaming games to anything, but in our case, the Vision Pro, where Apple is, with its OSs, pinging channel 149 periodically to check for AirDrop and other continuity type features. And what that does in video games is it causes terrible stuttering, both in the video and the audio, because you're watching basically a real-time feed. And I just got to think that if Apple were to actually build a router, they could have accounted for that. Whereas here we are, dealing with messing around the channels and things in our router systems.
Yeah. So that thing about the Vision Pro and the channel 149, it's such a strange limitation or design decision. The fact that it's not documented anywhere, that we had to find out about this via Reddit, a subreddit, and I believe one of the developers of the channels streaming app got in touch with you on Mastodon and told you about this. Yep. So the fact that it's sort of known amongst like developers and power users, but not documented anywhere. And also like the second layer to that, the fact that there's a European version of that channel, as we saw previously, it's channel 44 in Europe. I think that's such a strange story all around, that Apple doesn't have a support document about this, that it's like knowledge shared by people on Reddit through trial and error. I think that's so weird, honestly.
Yeah, it really is strange. And so where I ended up was, when I wrote that gaming story about the Vision Pro, which I'll link in the show notes, I was having trouble with all various types of streaming. And it was, I think, because of channel 149. And the problem I had with the Linksys routers is I can't change the channel on those. So I kind of after hearing what you did, which is you got one of the Asus Wi-Fi routers. And what is it, like the 7800? I think it's called the AX 7800.
Yeah,
I think that's what it is. I started looking at the Asus routers, and of course, I immediately went to the Wi-Fi 7 routers and took a look at those. And they have a gaming one that came out at CES that has all kinds of RGB lights on it that you can fortunately turn off. But it has 8 antennas. It looks like an upside down spider, and it's I think it's like 13 inches, like 450 millimeters wide. It's as big as a pizza box. And it has all these antennas coming off of it. And I showed it to Jennifer. She said, "You're not getting that, are you?" And it's like, well, of course not. I was very close to buying it, but I didn't. Instead, I got something called the Asus Zen Wi-Fi Pro ET12. Okay.
Now, so the Zen Wi-Fi line. Okay.
Yeah. So this is more like your you've seen them from a lot of makers, whether it's Orbi or Linksys or whatever, where it's like kind of a tower that you sit somewhere and you create a mesh network with it. Now, my biggest frustration really is the fact that I have this place under the stairs where the internet comes in, and I have to deal with that. Now, one way to deal with that would be to have a guy come out and reroute all the cabling in my walls and punch holes in the walls and things. And that's both an expense and a mess that I really don't want to deal with. So I've been trying to find a way to work around it. And I've been really happy with with this system, because the reception and the coverage is far better than the Linksys system. I think there are like 8 antennas in each one of these, but they're built into the little rectangular tower. And it looks a little bit like a skyscraper. It's got this weird kind of ridged black plastic exterior that's used to help dissipate heat without having to have a fan. But then the top part, the penthouse, if you will, of the skyscraper is clear plastic. And inside the clear plastic is a giant Asus logo with almost like an eclipse. It looks like sun rays coming out from the Asus logo that are all RGB, and they light up very brightly. And yes, you can turn those off, which I did, because one of these is under the stairs in a closet, which is fine. It can RGB all at once in the closet. But in our living room, I didn't want that, especially right next to the TV where I'm going to be watching a show. So I turned it off on the one. So we have one in the closet on the first floor, one next to the TV upstairs in the living room. And I thought, these are not cheap, but they're not like as expensive as when I bought the Linksys ones. I thought, well, I'm going to just buy these 2 because they don't sell a 3-pack. They only sell a 2-pack. And I'll just buy these 2. And if I have to, I'll pick up one more. And I am amazed that I don't need a third one on my 3rd floor. Because I think that the second router is basically right beneath my bedroom. On my iPhone, I can get nearly a full gigabit per second download speed while lying in bed. So it's totally fine in like my bedroom, the other bedroom up there. It's not quite as good, but it's very good. We're fortunate that on the 2nd and 3rd floors, the layout is a lot more open than it is on the 1st floor. So really the only place where the reception is not 100%, not as good as I'd really like it to be, is my office, which isn't ideal, but I use wired internet there for my computer. And that's all I really need. I mean, I don't think I'm ultimately going to play a lot of games in my office anyway. Yeah. I think there are various places, whether it's in my bedroom sitting in bed or whether it's in the living room sitting in a chair, those are the places I want to have the best coverage, and I do. So I've been really super happy with this particular model. So I thought I'd just share that with people, because the thing about it, besides just having great reception, is that it has an actually pretty good app on the iPhone, as well as a website you can go to, and you can tweak the settings to your heart's content. And what's nice about it is, although some of this stuff is really complicated, the good thing about Asus is so many people use it that there's a ton of resources on Reddit and elsewhere, and in Asus's support forums, where you can find out what all the stuff means and get guidance on what you should do.
Yeah, and they all use the same operating system. So even if you get a different model of a different router, but it's still using the same OS inside, you can find, an explanation for a different router that still applies to yours.
This episode of MacStories Unwind is brought to you by Collide. What do you call an endpoint security product that works perfectly but makes users miserable? It's a failure. The old approach of endpoint security is to lock down employee devices and roll out changes through forced restarts, but it just doesn't work. IT is miserable because they've got a mountain of support tickets. Employees start using personal devices just to get their work done, and executives opt out the first time it makes them late for a meeting. You can't have a successful security implementation unless you work with end users. That's where Collide comes in. Their user-first device trust solution notifies users as soon as it detects issues on their devices and teaches them how to solve it without needing help from IT. That way, untrusted devices are blocked from authenticating, but users don't stay blocked. Collide is designed for companies with Okta, and it works on macOS, Windows, Linux, and mobile devices. So if you use Okta and you're looking for a device trust solution that respects your team, visit collide.com/MacStoriesUnwind to watch a demo and see how it works. That's KOLIDE.com/MacStoriesUnwind. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
I've had a similar experience when you mentioned being amazed by the speeds when you just have 2 instead of 3. I've had a similar experience myself. So I got a third one for my bedroom, and I'm not sure I'm going to keep it because I've noticed that just by having the second one in my office, so to describe you like my network setup, I have my modem in the living room, and that's where the fiber cable goes. And then in access point mode, I have the first ASUS router that's plugged into the modem from my ISP. From that router, there's an Ethernet cable that goes into a network switch which also has a bunch of other accessories plugged in, like my Philips Hue bridge, my PlayStation 5, my TV, and all that. But then there's another Ethernet cable, a Cat6 Ethernet cable that goes into the wall and reaches my office. So I have wired internet in my office, full gigabit. In the office, in a little drawer that I have under the desk, I have the second ASUS router. So this has been set up in mesh mode, which ASUS for whatever reason calls AI mesh. I don't know why it's called AI mesh.
Because everything should be AI.
Everything should be AI. But that router, instead of this is the key thing to understand. The second router in my office, instead of using the Wi-Fi backhaul, so it's not connecting to the first one wirelessly, it's automatically defaulting to an Ethernet backhaul. So it gets the full speed. It doesn't have to repeat a Wi-Fi signal. It repeats a wired signal. So I get full speed in the office. And because of this, when I'm in the bedroom, I get really good Wi-Fi. To the point where if I add a third router to the bedroom, well, that one is using a Wi-Fi backhaul. It doesn't have Ethernet. I don't have Ethernet in the bedroom, unfortunately. And if I connect to that third router with Wi-Fi, I get much worse speeds than by connecting to the second one in the office. And that's because the second one in the office has an Ethernet backhaul.
Right. And that's, I have been reading about this, and from what I understand, a lot of people don't recommend ever using Wi-Fi 6E unless you have the Ethernet backhaul, because that really opens up the speed for it. And that's what I'm doing too. The reason I got the system I got is that it has a second 2.5 gigahertz port on it. And that, because I have 2 gigahertz, since I have 2 gigabit service, I'm able to connect throughout my house. So that one on the second floor is connected with a backhaul that's 2 gigabits per second. So that, that makes everything really fast. Now, I don't have a ton of stuff that takes advantage of that. I mean, the main reason I have 2 gigabit per second speed is for my desktop computer in my office. But, my iPhone does cross the 1 gigabit per second threshold when I'm sitting in the living room now because of that. And that's kind of nice. And I have a couple other things that are fast, like the AN Odin 2, I think, is Wi-Fi 7, and the MacBook Pro is got Wi-Fi 6E. So I think right now, like, my advice for people would be, don't do what I did with 6E, which was when 6E first came out. I jumped right on it and bought one of the first things out there because, it was fine, but within a year or so, there were a lot better options out there, like these Asus routers. And so I wouldn't jump on Wi-Fi 7 yet. And I didn't. I thought about it for this upgrade, but I decided to hold off and wait, because one of the things that's nice about a lot of these companies, like Asus, for instance, with this AI mesh, is that you can combine different models of their routers together in your mesh system. So if I down the road decide I want to go for Wi-Fi 7, I could install that on the first floor and then just keep one of the 6E ones on the second floor. That one might have a few limitations that maybe the 7 doesn't, but it's a good way to do that without having to just like trash an entire system. You can mix and match them within a brand like that.
Yeah. The last thing I will say is that I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, mostly via my Vision Pro and the NDI encoder that I have. And with the Vision Pro connecting wirelessly to the Asus router in my office. So to paint you a picture, there's 2 walls separating my bedroom from the office. There's like the office with its wall. There's a short hallway, and then the bedroom. So there's 2 walls, and it's been working out perfectly, streaming at 4K 60, no problem. The only thing I've noticed is that the Vision Pro is because of those small antennas, very sensitive to head movements. Sometimes, for example, let's say that my dogs make a noise when they're sleeping, or Sylvia turns and I turn to check on her or to check on the dogs. Yep. And when I turn my head back to stare at the virtual display, I can see that the Wi-Fi stutters for like a couple of seconds. And that's the Vision Pro sort of being very sensitive to your physical position when it comes to, streaming that kind of signal, 4K 60 over Wi-Fi, saturating my local bandwidth. I can imagine that the Vision Pro with its small Wi-Fi antennas inside is very sensitive to that. And then after a couple of seconds, it sort of resumes the normal streaming quality, and it's fine. But I noticed that, and it's not something that happens with an iPad Pro, for example, or with an iPhone, but it happens with the Vision Pro.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I mean, it really is the choke point, one of the main choke points on the device. But I think over time that will improve, and it'll get better. But I've had similar experiences with my setup. I'm really happy with how I've got it all going now. I have to actually start using it, though. I've mostly been experimenting with trying the different routers and nodes in different places. But now I'm convinced that the setup that I started with at the very beginning is the one that makes the most sense and works the best. So I'm looking forward to actually now digging in a little deeper and getting some of the games set up like you and I have talked about in the past, and doing some remote play for the PS5 and Xbox and things like that. All right, Federico, that was an extra geeky MacStories Unwind, but that sometimes unwinding is about tearing out your Wi-Fi network and starting over. And, if you're listening to MacStories Unwind, you're probably one of those people, even though I know it's a little odd. But that's the kind of thing that we do for, I guess, I don't know if I would call it relaxation. I mean, I almost, when I was setting this up, I almost gave up at one point because I was having some frustrations with it. But I'm glad it worked out in the end, and it'll pay off long term for me. I'm gonna leave it alone now and just enjoy the actual fast speeds. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, which is Collide. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. We are on Mastodon. Just go to Viticci.MacStories.net and JohnVorhees.MacStories.net to follow us there. And we are on Instagram and Threads, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.